Hello and welcome. With us today, we've got Betty, who had an NDE that she's going to share with us. Betty, thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks so much. I'm really excited. Thanks for thinking of me and letting me come and share my experience with you.
Absolutely. You are free to start at whatever point you feel is most relevant to the story, and you can take it from there.
Okay, cool. So yeah, my story involves a little bit of backstory. So I'll start with just telling you that I grew up in like this very chaotic, dysfunctional home. And like spirituality, anything about God was not part of the picture. My whole family is like a perpetual cycle of addiction and poverty and sexual trauma and abuse. And so, like I started using drugs when I was very young to cope with my experience. And that's how my life just like continued, up until my awakening, which was almost 4 years ago now. And yeah, like I had parents that were drug addicts, and their parents taught them how to use, and my parents taught me how to use. And in 2007, my parents decided to stop using drugs and they committed suicide together because they didn't know that there was any other way to stop using drugs.
Wow.
Yeah. And, like that death obviously left a really big mark on me. I was already an addict before that happened, but this trauma like gave me this great excuse to use. And, like it was the only way that I could cope was with using drugs. And so, like my life just became really unmanageable. And, I thought that I was, like this party girl. I thought that I was like this really feel good time. And then my dis-ease of addiction just continued to progress until it became all encompassing and it became my whole personality. Now I have some language for it, but I was completely immersed in my shadow self, and that's how I acted throughout every second of my day. And I experienced a lot of other traumas in my life. That wasn't the first one that happened to me, it wasn't the last, but it certainly was the most profound. And I just used drugs as this great crutch in my life, and until the universe didn't want me to do that anymore. So what ended up happening was I overdosed around 3.5 years ago, and I went to heaven. Which is a weird sentence to say because when I entered the space of heaven, I was a devout militant atheist. Not only was I an atheist, but I had caused a lot of harm in my life. Like what had happened to me in my young adulthood with my parents, it was the last instance where I allowed myself to be a victim, to feel like a victim. After that, I decided that I was going to be the perpetrator in people's stories. I was going to be the abuser because I was so tired of feeling like I was victimized and abused myself. And so when I entered this space of heaven, I was, I was really strung out on drugs. I was about to be homeless. I was doing sex work for a living. I was a manipulator, a liar, a thief. I was all of the things that you would think wouldn't get you into heaven. And then there I was, just sitting enveloped in the unconditional love and grace of source. And, like just this epic feeling of unworthiness tried to wash over me, like, how could I be here? I don't even believe in this. How could I be here? And, it was quickly combated away because from what I understood from the experience, unconditional love is all that there really is. And it was as if my human life had never even happened. I could barely grab any of my life. And so while I was in this experience, I was taken through my pre-birth planning. So yeah, how some people believe in an afterlife, I was taken through the life before life, and I was shown that I had chosen everything that has ever happened to me. And, like I had been through a lot of adversity, and, even in that space, I was completely combative to it. I was like, there's no way that I picked this or that. And so they took me through the moment when I, as a soul, had chose each partner that I would have my emotional, physical, sexual abuses with, the partners that I would be the perpetrator in their stories, husbands, boyfriends, my sibling, my parents. I picked them and we picked their death together for certain spiritual reasons. I picked the family line that I would be born into because it was about healing a lot of ancestral karma and collective karma. And I knew that being born into this bloodline of, like a very low vibrational energy, I was going to have an opportunity to transform it. And again, like while all this is happening, I'm like just thinking that I'm hallucinating. I didn't think that any of this was real. But I just went with it because I didn't have any other choice. I was like, all right, I'm in it. I'm in it. I might as well keep going. And, like in this moment of being downloaded with this belief, I instantly shifted out of my victim mentality and I rose into my divinity as a co-creator of my experience. Things had no longer happened to me, they had happened for me because on some soul level, I had chosen it for the evolvement of myself. And so, while I was in this space, although I was still very skeptical, I'm probably the only spirit to make it to heaven and actually be pissed. I was like so mad when I got there. I was like, I can't believe that I'm wrong. I can't believe that, like I've been stuck on earth. And so, like I just kept affirming to them that I would not come back. They said, well, you have to go back. And I was like, no way, not me. I'm not going back. And they said, like you chose all of these things in your life, but you didn't see the rest of what you had chosen. And like some of the boxes, like it looked like cereal boxes, like in a grocery store. And I was putting them in a cart. And some of them were like, overcoming, recovery, community, all of these spiritual experiences, synchronicities, soulmates, kindred spirits. But I hadn't seen any of that in my life yet because I had only seen the struggle and adversity of all the things I had picked for the beginning part of the life. And they said, like, they said, you're a spiritual soldier. You're sent to earth with a divine mission. The first half of your life has been boot camp. And now you have to go back and carry out the mission. And I'm sure that it's much like people who are actually in the military, like they have no idea what they're getting into. Like they know that boot camp's going to be hard, but they're like, people get through it all the time. And then they're there and there's some guys screaming in their face in the rain, in the mud, and they're doing 100 push-ups. And then, they get to go home after boot camp for a couple of days. And I'm sure that they don't want to go back to finish, like their run in the military. And that's what it felt like for me. They said, you have to go back and do the mission. And I said, I will not go back. And I transformed into like this small child. That's what I perceived. And I was like stomping my hands and my feet, crying on the ground. And I was like, don't make me go back. I will not go back. And I said, I definitely will not go back into her. And I pointed to my body because I could perceive myself outside myself. And they said, okay, you don't have to go back into her, but you do have to go back. And so we'll show you the baby that you're going to be born into. And they showed me this baby. And again, because of like the generation that I'm born in, and I perceived it like a video game. And so they showed me my new avatar, right? And it looked like a computer screen. And I saw the new avatar, it was little baby. And then it showed me all the stats for the baby and all of the adversity and opportunity to overcome in this baby's life. And, I had experienced just so much in my life. And I looked at this baby's timeline and she had even deeper levels of adversity than I had already experienced. And, I just threw my hands up in the air and I said, I'm not starting from zero. Okay. Like I'll go back into her, like begrudgingly. And then I sort of came back into my awareness. My awakening lasted it was like 8 hours. It started, late in the afternoon and I didn't wake up, like back in my awareness until past midnight. And it was a long experience. I have some language for it now. It was a Kundalini awakening that transported me to the space of eternity. And Kundalini energy is described as life force energy. Some people call it receiving the Holy Spirit in the Western world. And Kundalini energy is described as a coiled snake at the base of your spine. And when your Kundalini awakens, the serpent straightens up. And so it activates all your chakras. And so as my chakras got activated, when my crown got activated, my spirit shot out of my crown and went into the space of eternity. And that's where my experience took place. And so I came back from this experience. I just wrote it off as drug-induced psychosis. Like I said, I was an atheist. I was a drug addict. I was a sex worker. Like, this was not part of my picture. And I just thought that I got so messed up that I was talking to God, you know? And there was two messages that were very loud and clear while I was there. One was obviously you have to go back to earth. The other was you have to stop using drugs and you have to come on to your mission. And I just didn't know how to do that, you know, and I had a physical dependency to heroin. And so, you know, it wasn't an option to stop using because I was too fearful of getting sick. And so I just went about my life. And then the universe stepped in a very loud, tangible way. And all these divine synchronicities started to take place to get me onto a different path. So all the drug dealers that I had been dealing with for over a decade all simultaneously decided to change their lives and stop selling drugs. Like people that did not know each other, so that I had no way to get drugs. And then drugs just began to not work. And I was on day 3 of heroin withdrawal, which is the absolute worst. It's like what's depicted in films. Like it's when you're sick all over yourself, sweating, your skin, your bones are on fire, and like you are welcoming death. And I was laying in my bed, just so sick. You know, I had been on opiates for nearly 25 years. And, like I said out loud to myself, wow, I couldn't even kill myself if I wanted to, because I'm so sick that I can't even get up out of bed and figure out a way to kill myself. I can't even go into the kitchen and get a knife. I can't go to the store and go buy 100 Tylenol. That's how sick I am. And in that moment, I heard this voice and it told me it said, you can request what you want fixed. And, you know, I was like in the throes of desperation. I was willing to believe anything. And so I was very over intellectual about it. I said, okay, I want my pain receptors and my neurotransmitters fixed. I want to no longer be physically dependent on heroin. I didn't say that I wanted to be rid of my drug addiction because I still wanted to do other drugs. I just didn't want to be physically dependent to this one substance. And so I laid back and I felt these X's go across my forehead. And these 2 little men appeared in my mind's eye, and they were wearing white lab coats, and little lawnmowers appeared in front of them. And I watched them go through every crevice of my mind with these lawnmowers. And as they went through, I felt hot tingles, and I knew that I was being restored. I knew that my pain receptors were being healed back to their original state. And then it felt like a palm came on my forehead, a plunger on the top of my head. And as it plunged down, this bright white flash, and I was instantaneously healed out of day 3 of heroin withdrawal. I mean, like a few moments before, I was puking all over myself, just like sicker than I had ever been. And then all of a sudden, I was completely well. And I knew that I had to pay attention now, like this was it. Like there was no denying what was going on now. And so, at first I thought that I had to tell the world about this, like, oh my God, healing is possible. God is real. And so I went out and I started sermonizing on the New York City subway system. I was like evangelizing, like going through the subway cars saying like, source is real, source is benevolent, source loves you, don't eat McDonald's, it's poison. And like, I mean, I was just completely wacky and like completely out of my mind. And then my integration process started to take place after that, after I made a fool of myself for a couple of days. And, like I was sitting on this train and I had nowhere to go, nothing to do. I was just completely lost and confused. And this man appeared across from me, and he was wearing a 12-step fellowship necklace. And I heard a voice in my head, and it said, that's your path. Follow him to a meeting. And so I followed him to a meeting, and that was on June 1st, 2019. And I've been clean ever since. And I went to a few more meetings over the next couple of days. And I found myself in a meeting sitting next to the program director of a women's therapeutic community here in Brooklyn, a long-term rehab. And, I knew that it was a sign that I just so happened to be sitting next to this woman, like I knew that I didn't know how to be a person and that I needed help. And so I figured this was probably the best way to do it. I was about to be homeless. It wasn't like I had anything, like left in my life. like I needed a place to live, and a rehab seemed like a good place to maybe like sort out what was going on inside my mind. And so I had a plan that I was going to talk to her when the meeting ended. And when it ended, I looked over and she had left early, and I felt totally defeated. I was like, oh man, I can't believe that I didn't talk to her. But I knew that I was going to call there. And so I went on the bus to go home. And when I stepped onto the bus, that woman was sitting right there. It was like this, like this fail safe plan. Like the universe was not going to let me fail. There were situations put in place for me to step onto my journey. And I ran up to this woman totally manic, and I was like, oh my God, you're an angel. You're sent to earth. You're here for me. I can't believe it. Thank you so much. Can you help me? Can you help me? And she said, yeah, we can help you. Come by tomorrow. We have a bed for you. And I went there with just the clothes on my back. Like I said, I didn't have anything. I had no money, no prospects, no dignity, no sanity. And I went into this program and I stayed there for 17 months. And that's where I integrated my spiritual experience. And I didn't have any language for anything that had happened to me. There was nobody there that understood what I was talking about. I had a safe space to sit and heal and feel and learn. And I had this insatiable thirst for knowledge. I wanted to know everything about spirituality. I read every sacred text. I read every book I could find about metaphysics and the law of attraction. And I began to manifest my reality. And teachers came and found me inside of a rehab. This is how I know that my experience was a true one, because of all the divine synchronicities that took place after. And like this man came by to volunteer his time at the rehab, and he was a meditation teacher, and he was coming from a Buddhist temple, just randomly, just totally divine, and synchronized. And this man helped me on my journey in such a huge way. And he let me know that I wasn't alone, and that the thoughts that I was having, they were true thoughts about eternity and the true nature of reality. And, all of these like conscious questions that were coming into my mind, all these quantum questions. And as the sort of like constructs of society started to dissolve in my life, I was able to start building new ones. And like while I was there, I went to school to become a peer advocate, and I have a job in the recovery field now, which is just totally incredible. Like I used to do really unsavory things to make money. I caused a lot of harm to myself and to other people in the process. And today I have this amazing opportunity to make a universal amends, and I assist people on their healing journeys today. And it's more than I ever could have thought for myself. And, after my experience, it was as if every cell in my body absolutely demanded to transform 180 degrees. I had no choice. I mean, even the foods that I was eating before, I could no longer process them in my body. I got rid of like no meat, no dairy, no gluten, no caffeine, no drugs, no alcohol, no nicotine. It was like everything in me was saying, like, you have to be different, like you have to do something different. And yeah, my whole life is so different now. And I have all of these great techniques that I use to stay fit in my spiritual journey. Like I study A Course in Miracles, which is a metaphysical text channeled by Jesus. And it has a workbook inside of it. So I do daily lessons. I study the Baha'i faith with a wonderful group of people. I'm in 12-step fellowship. So I practice the 12 steps, which is a very spiritual program. And I belong to a group for near-death experiencers and spiritual experiencers on the IONS platform. And my life is so immersed in community today. And, my life before my awakening was just complete depravity and isolation. And for me, like part of my spiritual purpose is being immersed in community and bringing community together. And anyway, I'm so grateful I was able to share that piece of myself with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Now, I really remember the first time I heard your story. Usually what I do is I'll put like interviews and stuff like that in my earbuds and go to sleep to them. And your story snapped me awake because it sounds so similar to mine, where I'm not trying to make this all about me, but in a nutshell, Like my story was a suicide attempt, 2 suicide attempts, 1 near-death experience. Then I did go homeless and lived on the streets, and then when I lived in a homeless shelter is where I discovered the law of attraction and started using it from there, and one thing I didn't mention off camera was that my career now was a manifestation. It was an accident, but so and the question I had was, one of the things that I've come to learn through all my spiritual journey is that I have not had very many lifetimes on this planet at all. Would you consider yourself to be one of those volunteers who came here to help?
I do perceive that I'm a second wave volunteer, but I also perceive that I have been on Earth for a long time. So, and it does talk about it in some of the Dolores Cannon literature
Mhm.
that even if you are a volunteer, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've never been here
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
But lots of the volunteers have never been here before. But I do perceive that I've been here for the whole of creation here.
Mm.
And yeah, so
Yeah, one of my spiritual mentors who has passed now, her name was Naya. She refers to those as long-term humans coming out of the game. And like well, everybody has, there's a lot of ambiguous terms in the spiritual community, but like the term star seed, typically when I use that word, I don't just mean any volunteer. Typically what I mean is a volunteer who's never been here before, you know. So that's very fascinating to see, because most long-term humans who have been here since the beginning, they get so wrapped up in the game. I don't think I've ever met one before who's figured it out and started coming out of the game, you know?
Yeah, well, I do think that that's part of what's happening with the ascension process right now is that we're all meant to gather the awareness of the game and come out of the illusion. So for me, and it talks about it in some of the spiritual teachings that I subscribe to as well, like in A Course in Miracles. In A Course in Miracles, it says that we're inside of a dream, and for most of us, this is a nightmare. And the thing is to gather enough awareness to reprogram yourself to be able to make it the happy dream. Like, so for me, it's not really about, at first I thought I was about leaving. I just was doing whatever I had to do to get back to heaven. Like that's all that I thought that I was doing. And then I realized that it's not about going back to heaven, because heaven is actually here. It's just about removing the blocks to love that I have in my experience here on earth and creating heaven here.
Do you feel like that Kundalini experience was something that most people could access, or do you feel like that was something that was pushed on you to snap you awake?
Maybe both. For me, it was part of my pre-birth planning. So my awakening was going to happen no matter what. And this is how I know that this is a multiverse. I mean, it was some of the information that I was also downloaded with, but everything, I believe everything is happening simultaneously at the exact same time. So like, yes, I am a star seed from the constellation of Orion. I'm there now. I'm also perceived that I'm here, and I'm also in a million other galaxies all simultaneously, because this is an infinite universe. But like, my human logical mind can't really wrap itself around that, and so we use things like in a linear fashion to sort of comprehend. And the thing is that we're expanding our awareness no matter what. Like, just the idea of believing in star seeds or believing in volunteers, that's an expansion of our consciousness. So for me, yeah, the process of just like this whole sort of like I think of it sort of like science fiction, right? Like the video game, like this Sims Earth. And yeah, like gathering the awareness around it and coming out of it has been a challenge, because there's so many things in my daily experience that make me sort of recenter and refocus on like what Earth is, which is why I stay like really steadfast in my spiritual practices and my spiritual communities.
When it comes to manifesting, this is actually my primary area of expertise. I
Mm.
even ended up attending a mind mastery school that was actually founded and taught by a former NASA scientist, where I learned like the science behind it. And I'm constantly, and that's what I do with my tarot card readings. I try to sprinkle little seeds of manifestation in there. And, do you have any techniques in mind that you think could help people? Because, like, one thing I noticed on my journey is that you got all these people out here teaching it, but I always felt like you're missing something, and I've been devoting my life to trying to figure out a way to explain it so as many people can, grab onto it as they can.
Yeah, I love that. Making it digestible for the collective,
Yeah.
because this is so the way that one of the ways that I know manifestation is 1,000% real, not only from like the physical, tangible manifestations that I see in my life, but I also see that I've always been manifesting.
Hmm.
It's not like I only just started manifesting when I came into awareness about it.
Yeah.
My whole life before was manifesting because of my own thoughts. So, like, my thoughts were I wake up in the morning, I'm a drug addict, I'm a prostitute, I'm impoverished, I'm homeless. Those are my thoughts. And so that's the experience that I was having, and it wasn't until this awakening that it snapped me out of it. And I said, okay, maybe I should start thinking different thoughts, like if this isn't the experience that I want to have. So for me, I read Gabrielle Bernstein's books, and she has a very digestible way of explaining manifestation to the collective. And thank goodness for her, because that's how I became really introduced to it, and just practicing little things. So for me, with manifesting, it gets a lot easier when I'm taking care of myself, when like I'm in a good state mentally, because like I said, I'm constantly manifesting everything around myself. So for me, I eat clean, I exercise, I drink water, and I fill myself with information that I feel will serve a greater purpose. And then I set intention. And a big part of manifesting for me is taking pen to paper. You must write it down. Like that, this is a very strong belief of mine. Maybe it's not for everybody, but I have long lists of things that I've written down, and like they all just magically come true, and like I'm no more special than anybody else. We are all infinitely special, and we all have access to this. It's just about the belief in it, So now I believe in manifesting. So manifesting happens in my life because I have a very strong belief around it. And the thing is that I have to get rid of the beliefs that don't that they're not cohesive with that, So like if I have a belief that I'm a victim to the world, or like there's these powers that be that are in control and they don't want good things for me, then I can't manifest things, because those two beliefs contradict each other. So I think that for me, the easiest way, or like, some of the ways that I think it's digestible to think about manifesting is I believe that the things I desire are they're already in my world, and I'm open to the universe surprising me. Because yeah, it's like being a little kid on Christmas morning, like opening up a present, like I don't know what's in here, but I'm so excited. And that's the way that I approach manifesting now, because I don't always know what's for my highest good. I might want a Corvette and a bag of cash, but that might not be for the highest good for myself, and more importantly, the highest good for all. So now I try to manifest like attributes in my life. I ask for peace, serenity, calm, spiritual connection. And I find that when I have those attributes, my physical world changes a lot quicker.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was because, to me, I'll be the first to admit that was the first thing I ever set out to manifest was the material stuff. And the funny thing that I learned when I started learning the science behind it and how it works, you start learning that everything kind of manifests the same way. So for me, I feel like whenever you figure out how to manifest one thing, like money, for example, that's like the most kindergarten baby step, and everybody thinks that's the end all be all. But when you're like, oh, well, if this is how the energy of money works, then this is how the energy of everything works. And it sets this domino effect to where you see that everything kind of functions on the same operating system. When it comes to like writing things down, do you have a technique? Do you write it in a certain way?
Well, I always write in affirmation. So like I am, I have, not I want. If you affirm to the universe that you want something, it means that you do not currently have it. And that's not how manifestation works. So always an am or a have statement. like just an affirmation, like, hey, this is my life. Of course, I am successful. I am, I am healthy. I am healed. I am, all of these things. So that's definitely one of the techniques with writing.
Okay. Awesome. Would you be would like I'm sure that once I post this, there will probably be some people that would want to reach out to you. Are you open to that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I love making new friends on the spiritual journey. It feels like meeting new classmates, but not like high school classmates, like kindergarten classmates where like you're actually excited to meet them and love them and know them. So yeah, I'm always really excited to meet new people.
Awesome. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
So I'm on Instagram. My handle is Buddha.Betty. And I'm on Facebook and YouTube, and my handle is Buddha Betty there as well. And yeah, like if you have questions about recovery or manifestation, or you just are looking for some spiritual community or a new friend, I'm definitely open to connecting.
Awesome. Did you have anything else you wanted to promote? Do you have any books or anything out there?
Nope, not yet.
Okay.
I
Well,
am an author. I affirm it. It's happening.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel you. Well, that's awesome. Amazing story. Awesome advice. Before we wrap it up, would you have a positive message you would want to share for the viewers?
Yeah, I really like sharing this Wayne Dyer quote because it's changed my whole life. But it is, when I believe it, I'll see it. Believe, 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 and it will be shown to you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Betty. That was awesome. One of the coolest interviews I think I've done on this channel. So thank you so much for being my guest. You have a good day, and I wish you the best.
Thanks so much.
All right. Bye bye.